Good evening. Don't worry about the extension cords. Wow, they messed everything up. Okay. I don't know about you, but I'm an early riser. Welcome to my barista masterclass for you guys. Now, I'm an early riser. I like that. My wife's a night owl. And so while she parties, I'm an old soul and I sleep and stuff like that. But just like everyone else in this world, it's a hard time for me to get up in the morning. Maybe like you. Maybe you just you have a body clock. Does anyone have like a body clock that just wake up on their own? Yeah, okay, a few of you guys. Well, I don't. Although I like waking up early in the morning, I don't. I still need to get up early and stuff like that. But here's the thing. Waking up in the morning is tough because, your eyes are heavy, you're groggy. Sometimes you're so groggy that you don't even know what year it is. And but here's one thing I enjoy in the morning. The thing that gets me up in the morning always is Jesus. You thought I was gonna say coffee, didn't you? It's Jesus. But also on top of that, it is coffee as well. Now, as a matter of fact, I probably need coffee more just to actually read my Bible and stuff like that. But here's the thing. I'm taking you through my little coffee routine here in the morning. Now, the world goes so fast. It moves fast. Social media, businesses, news, they try and grab your attention. I remember a few years ago, I was waking up, and the first thing I would do was just go on Instagram and just scroll through there. And I just realized this is my coffee setup. I like coffee in the morning, and this is what I do every single morning. Now, this process takes me about roughly 4 minutes from bean to cup. And you can't rush the process. This is something I do every morning, and it's just kind of I just take away the world, and this is just kind of me in Jesus time sometimes while I'm making this cup of coffee, and it just smells amazing. Now, making coffee in the morning just takes a process. As you can see here, there's a process happening made. Now, the promise of coffee is there. It is there for me to reach. It's there for me to grab. It's accessible. It's available for me. But there's a process to it, right? Okay, so you go, and now you might be thinking to yourself, oh, Ruben, why don't you just get Tim Hortons? It's right there for you. I'm like, okay, easy. If a cup of coffee is going to set up my whole morning, I'd rather just enjoy my experience instead of just drinking, acid, sludge, liquid, and stuff like that. But here's the process, okay? Now, as you can see, the process is pretty clear. You got to make sure the power supply is on. Got to make sure the kettle is on. Now, I'm bougie. Just stay in your lane. And if you're like, hey, Ruben, you're so nerdy about your coffee, I would just say, shut up. This is my time. I have the microphone right now, so this is my time. So anyways, I go and I make my cup of coffee, and as I do this, the process is very clear. Now, here's the thing. Tonight, I want to take a look at one verse in the book of Romans. Now, if you just recently come with us or just come checked out for the first time tonight, we're in a series called Heavy Hitters, and basically we're journeying through the book of Romans. And it is a letter written by Paul. Now, Paul decides to write this letter towards Rome, the church in Rome, and understands that Rome is pretty much a super city. It's a center hub of culture, wealth, resources, you name it. And if he can write a letter to them and be like, oh, if the church of Rome can get it, massive influence can come. And that's his heart of writing towards the church of Rome. And so we've been journeying through the whole course of the book of Romans, and it's been fantastic so far. But tonight, I want to cap off by just taking a look at one specific verse. Now, it's right smack dab in the middle of the book. We haven't really covered it, but tonight we will. And this is probably the most popular verse in the book of Romans, and dare I say, probably even in the New Testament. And I'll explain why. Now, it's going to be on the screen for you, but this is what Romans 8:28 says. And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his will and to his purpose for them. This verse is found on t-shirts, bumper stickers, mugs, probably your Instagram bio, some of you guys. I'm just kidding. That's a promise from God. And just like making this cup of coffee, the promise of coffee is there for me. I'm blessed with it. The promise is there. I just made a quick cup right now. Probably not the best, but it'll do for right now. But it's there for you. The promise of God that everything will work together for good is there. It's accessible, yes. But here's the clincher. A lot of people will get frustrated in the church and frustrated at God for this specific verse. That if things don't work out accordingly to plan, then God is not good. But that's not it whatsoever. So tonight, I want to give you guys just a deeper context, a deeper understanding, and also just kind of give you this holistic view that will also, it will inspire you, challenge you, but also give you a deeper understanding and encouragement of how God is for you. He wants things for you, and his love is for you. But just like making a cup of coffee, there is a process to the promise. It's there for you, it's already available for you, but there's also steps to take for that. And so I kind of want to debunk a few things for you guys and just kind of give you more of an understanding for this specific verse. Now, God has good plans for us. That's a fact. You can take that to the bank. But how would you define good? What is good in our eyes, and what is good in the eyes of God? And so tonight, I want to take you through a few things, 5 specific things I've learned in terms of understanding this portion of Scripture. And I'm going to lay it down for you very nice and simple. I have ADD, so I'm a very linear thinker, okay? So 5 points, they all have one word, and they all begin with a letter as a save on my grade 8 report card. They all start with D's. First one is definition. I'm going to jump right in tonight. It's definition. And what do we know about the term good, the definition of good? Well, I could tell you something. It is highly subjective and it is highly selfish. Well, why do you say that, Ruben? Well, if something doesn't really go our way, our notion, our inclination is to really drift off. When we feel a hardship, and hardship is a word that we kind of use in the church often if you're just checking us out or if you're not a Christian, it's a pretty broad term. If I would say a hardship can mean multiple things. It could be pain, disappointment, abandonment, injustice, betrayal, hardship. And a lot of hardship that we go through actually doesn't really stem out of other people, but it actually stems out of ourselves. Like, we're the ones that we create the hardest hardship. And even Paul himself, who writes this book, and we're in Romans chapter 8, but in Romans chapter 7, leading up towards this, he even says this about himself. It says, Romans 7:19, for the good that I will to do, I do not do. But the evil I will not to do, that's what I practice. And I don't know if that hits you or you can relate to that, but for me, it hits me on like very different levels. Because yeah, I know like the grace of God is there, it's for you, it's whatever he did, not what we can do. But at the same time, I often get disappointed and frustrated with myself because I know there's so many things that I want to do, I need to do that will please Jesus, but I don't do it. But furthermore, there are so many things that go against Jesus that I am finding myself struggling with. Maybe you kind of understand where I'm going with this. Maybe you relate. With other people in this room, hardships could be pain, abandonment. For some of you, you may have experienced betrayal in family, friendships, relationships. Maybe there was a loss, maybe it was abandonment, maybe there was a sense of violation in your life. And your outcome to that, whenever we go through those things, is you're cold, you're bitter, you're protective, and not in a good way. Sure, we can quote Romans 8:28, God works everything for good. But when I look back on my life, that's not the definition of good. All these crappy things that happen, that's not good. As a matter of fact, that sucks. So once again, how are we defining good? Now I know it sounds counterintuitive, but often the good things God has for us, whenever he brings good things to us, he sometimes possibly allows the tough things to happen first. Why? Because God's definition of good isn't this surface level feeling how we necessarily define it. There's some body to it. Check out this quote by this lady named Joni Eareckson Tada. And in this one sentence here, there's actually some really dense theology. She says this, if it's gonna be on the screen. God will permit what he hates to accomplish that which he loves. God will permit what he hates to accomplish that to which he loves. Now, I don't know if you can see behind this on the LED wall behind me, but she's created some paintings. They look really cool. And you think to yourself like, oh, I've seen better. But actually, she did all those pieces of art with her mouth. Like she was drawing all over the place, yada, yada, yada. It's pretty cool. You're like, oh, that's decent. But when you say, oh, with her mouth, that's awesome. And you would think to yourself, and you would say to me, Ruben, like it's easy for you to quote that because it's harder when you actually go through it. the quote I just mentioned from Joni Tada? Well, as a matter of fact, Joni, had a cliff jumping accident when she was 18 years old. She was jumping off a cliff, and as soon as she hit the water, she didn't know there was a submerged log there. And she hit the log, and then from that moment on, at 18, she was paralyzed from the neck down for the rest of her life. And a few years later, after kind of wallowing in her grief and just grieving like I just lost my life, pretty much almost, I'm in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, this one person told her this line that I just quoted. And long story short, it was a life-changing moment for her. That was the moment where she met God. She went on to do different things. She speaks around the world. She creates more art that you can see behind me. And as of recently, she spoke at an interview at the age of 65. She's 72 now. But she said this. She said finding God was the best decision she's ever made. As a matter of fact, she said this, and I quote, that I would rather be in a wheelchair and have God than have 2 good feet and not God. Like, that is heavy. Like, that quote right there just carries some weight to it. So what is the definition of good? To understand what God has intended, even if we can't see it in the moment. Because hindsight will always reveal God's plan to us. So in the meantime, it's up to us to trust God and live, as Romans 8:28 says, according to his purpose, according to his plan, to his will. And the promise says that God will work it out for good. And if I know anything about God so far in my short life, is that God will keep his promise. But we'll explain that more in a little bit here. So if the definition is to become like Jesus and allow some space for messiness to occur, then when hardships come, whatever they may be, it will not stop you from progressing, but actually push you in the right direction. So the first one is definition. The second one is we gotta know the details of this. The details. Now notice the details of working bad things for good. Also notice how this verse specifically says God causes everything to work, what? Together. Together. So there's not one singular bad moment or singular bad thing. It's the bad things working cooperatively. Now, follow me on this one here. In the text, the word together, if you were to look at it in its original language, now I'm not gonna nerd out here and just go speaking all Greek on you, but if you were to look at it in the original language, which is Greek, it translates to synergia. Synergia, which you can probably get some sort of like idea of where we get our English word we get today. Synergy. You guys are awesome. You graduated high school. I'm proud of you. Synergy. The definition of synergy is multiple different things working together to accomplish, get this, what none of them can do by themselves. And on top of that, because of the chemical reactions and simply working together, you can sometimes even unlock new things which weren't there before. And so this is what Paul is trying to hit home here. He's trying to connect all these different things that even though these things, which look bad individually, they're going to be synergized for something way different than we can ever expect. Now, perfect illustration for this is salt. Salt. Now, we love salt. I know we do. I love salt. Put salt in everything. It makes me see Jesus. And for those who took chemistry back in high school, then you would nerd out and you would just jive with me on this one. Salt is only 2 ingredients, sodium and chloride. It's just 2 random elements on the periodic table, but when you put them together in the right way, it creates salt, which is beautiful. But here's the thing. Sodium and chloride, just on their own as elements, if you know this in high school, are what? They're poisonous and toxic and dangerous on their own. But if you bring them together in the right, correct way, they give you something that is wonderful and salty, and they preserve, and everything good of this world comes from this. They synergize into something that is productive and helpful. Now, it gives me hope that when I look back on my life and at the passage Paul is trying to convey here, because we will look at bad things in our lives individually and make our conclusion of who God is. I'm seeing a lot of head nods because you know it's right. You know it's true that we, our humanity, bad things happen and we will categorize them and silo them and then base our conclusion that God is not good because all these different things individually that happen. Now, I accepted Jesus when I was 17 years old. It was towards the end of my high school life. Now, I wasn't a bad kid. I had a decent family, but I didn't like God. As a matter of fact, I hated God. Now, some of you guys know my story, but if you don't know, there was some sequence of events in my life that kind of allowed me to shape my worldview and shape my view and perspective of who God is. I'll tell you. In a span of 2 years, specifically grade 9 and grade 10, I had the unfortunate opportunity to witness 4 people pass away before my eyes. So I'm a friend, we were walking home from school, we went our separate ways, she crossed the road, there's some cars, didn't see oncoming traffic, hit with a vehicle, passed away. I had another friend who overdosed in our school library. Watched that happen. My grandfather, my father's side, passed away with a heart attack. I've seen that. And my uncle committed suicide in my own house on my 14th birthday. When you see these things happen, now I've dealt with it, you don't have to worry. But when you see these things happen and experience them, you quickly start to develop a conclusion of what life should be like, and furthermore, who God is. Now, when I accepted Jesus at 17 years old, I realized in that moment, long story short, I realized that life is bigger than itself, and God's love and his grace just really showered me and just really took me in, and my life was changed. But now standing here in front of you guys at 32 years of age, looking back on my life, I realize how in these moments, I used to look at them individually, and I made my conclusion based on each one of them. But in my experience, I realized that when I look back on my life in hindsight, God has taught me that when you string all of these things together, I've learned 2 major things. Number 1, he's developed a character in me that I can't really explain. As a matter of fact, I can't really comprehend it. And the other thing is that he's developed a heart in me that when I was 17, I didn't know I was gonna be in front of you guys today, but God knew. And in that process, he allowed me as a pastor to have a heart that's relatable and empathetic and understanding for people who are going through specific things. It's the details. I look back and I see all these different things, and it's the details that cooperate together to make things and breed something beautiful, and how God promised us, I will work things for good. It's easy to look back at the bad stuff and be like, bad, sodium, chloride. When we string them together, it becomes a different story. And as a matter of fact, I would dare you to believe that it could possibly be a beautiful picture. Not possibly, will be. The third thing we need to understand, we look at the definition, then details. The third thing is the development. Now, going back towards this cup of coffee as I was making for you guys, so eloquently, suave, that process, it needs to be done every morning. I wake up, repeat, make my coffee, do my day, sleep, repeat, make my coffee, do my day. I don't make just one cup of coffee and it'll last you forever. No, every morning I'm doing that from bean to cup every 4 minutes. Oh, no, 4 minutes every single day. Wow, I am hyped up on caffeine right now. As you can tell, I've had a cup of coffee every 4 minutes. You have to plug it in, get the power supply, make sure the kettle, make sure the grinder's working, weigh out the beans, start the pour over process, make sure it's intentional, saturate every coffee ground so for even extraction, yada, 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 every single morning. And you and I on paper, we get it. I get it. God is working everything together for good. Yes, maybe your story is different than mine. Yes, possibly I was molested. Yes, maybe there was an abortion in my story. Yes, maybe there was a huge sense of betrayal. There was abandonment. And I'm waiting for all of this chemical reaction to happen. I'm waiting. But in reality, I'm still salty, and not in a good way. It's because we're being developed. Now, it's easier said than done, but, and I'll explain this, is that we serve a God of sowing and reaping. Now, if you're checking out the project, if you're not a Christian, that might be kind of like, whew, I don't know what that means. Sowing and reaping, meaning that if I plant a seed, if I sow a seed, that tree or plant or flower isn't gonna grow instantaneously. We serve a God whose timing does not match ours, but yet we live in a society where we have an Amazon Prime mentality. Like if it's not here the next day, I'm punching walls. Some of you guys are like that, I've seen it. And it's so difficult for us to comprehend when we turn to our Bibles and see characters like someone like David, who was in the Old Testament confirmed and affirmed that he was gonna be king of Israel at 15 years old, but didn't get to the throne until he was 30 years old. That frustrates us. So development in one season of your life may not show its result immediately. As a matter of fact, it could be the next season of your life. As a matter of fact, I know this may be hard to comprehend, but maybe the stuff that God is working in your life may not show up in results until maybe after you die. Like, it's crazy to think about that, right? Like, no, God has to work together for good now, for me, in this life. No, maybe the results could be after you die, after your funeral. It's crazy to think that, right? But here's the thing. In the Bible, there are many moments where God presents himself as, I'm the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Meaning, he's not just the God of your life. He's a God of generations. And he works all things for good, not just for your consumeristic life, but across the ages. And so it's sobering to think that my life, although I want to be as good as it can be, is so small in comparison to what God's ultimate plan is. So what kind of person do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to develop, to be developed-wise? I remember in grade 12, my youth pastor told me, listen, I don't want to be the type of person, when I die at my funeral, people are fighting to say my eulogy because they don't want to say anything. I want people to line up at the microphone to say good things that hopefully I've inspired them. And that saying got just kind of stuck with me. What do you want the end of your life to look like? What kind of person do you want to be? And who are you allowing to develop you? Now, we looked at details, the definition, details, development. The fourth thing is destination. Romans 8:28 has destination in mind. And this is super important. Now, our destination, I'm speaking in terms of if you follow Jesus, our destination is heaven. The focal point in Romans 8 is tying all these things together, prayers, pain, all the promises, and they all point towards heaven. Like all the bad stuff that happens here on earth, it will make our hearts break. Yes, I totally get you on that. Take a couple seconds on social media or your apps or the news, and you think to yourself, how did humanity come to this? Now, using language from Romans chapter 8, all the bad stuff that happens make you groan. When there's someone who took their life, when there's someone who was taken advantage of, when there was someone who was given that diagnosis, there's this groaning inside of us. Why? Why does that happen? It's because it says it beautifully in the Old Testament, this book called Ecclesiastes, in 3:11, it says that eternity has been planted in your hearts. God has planted eternity in your hearts because why are we longing for these heartbreaks? It's because we're longing for a life that's beyond this life. We're not longing for something temporary. We're longing for heaven. We're longing for eternity, where, by the way, there's no more pain, no more suffering, and no more deceit. So what does that have to do with all the good things being worked here? It gives us this reminder and hope that this life is not all that there is. Now, a lot of people get frustrated with this verse because they've kind of narrowly defined good as to what it is in this life, what I get to experience, what I get to have in this life. It's like checking into a hotel and you're upgrading the sofa. Like, you're paying extra just to upgrade the sofa. Like, why? It's like going to a hotel room, staying there for a few nights, and you're paying extra money, demolish a countertop. I want granite. Like, that sounds ridiculous, right? Like, why are you investing so much even though you're staying there just for a couple of nights? Well, it's the same thing for our lives. Why are we investing so much when this life is so short? Even though that you and I get to possibly live to 60, 70, 80, 90, dare I even say 100 years old. That's so short in comparison to forever. So when we understand that, it puts everything into a new perspective. That I would be okay for the tough things on earth in comparison to what I get to look forward to as a result in heaven. That's what Paul says in Romans 8:18. In that same chapter, he says this. He says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed to us." Now tonight, we'll be taking part of communion. It's such a fundamental thing for us, but also at the same time, it's a beautiful tradition. And so if you're here and you're new and you just check out the project, church in general, feel free to not participate. It's all good. You can spectate and just watch what is happening. As we transition to communion tonight, I want to land the plane with our final word. We took a look at the definition, the details, the development, the destination. The fifth one is dependability. What is the dependability of Romans 8:28? How dependable is this promise? Like, it's a good promise, right? Like, yeah, I dig that. I want that. Working everything for good. Sign me up. But a promise is only as good as the one who's making it, right? Like, I can come to you and I'd be like, I could teach you how to ride a horse. Consider the source. Look at me. Is there anything about me just shout equestrian? I don't know. So my promise doesn't line up with my life. So when we hear someone say, I can make all things work together for good, consider the one who said it. He's never failed. Time and time again, he has proven in the course of scripture and the course of my life, and perhaps your life as well, that he's constantly taking bad and negative and toxic things and making it better for good. I could look back on my life, like I mentioned before, in my story, in my past experience, and I can see how, even though I may not visibly see God or tangibly feel God, that his fingerprints are all over the place. One of my favorite shows to watch is Criminal Minds, and I love these kind of police detective shows, and you can tell as they're trying to find their way to who the murderer is, what they're looking for, clues. And clues usually derive first off of these fingerprints. You may not know if God's there just yet in a moment, but as you look back on your life, you will see these fingerprints. You will see these tangible actions like, wow, God was there. We make, on average, 10,000 decisions every single day as human beings. 10,000 decisions every single day. Now, you and I can probably remember 5. It's like what we're gonna wear and what we're gonna eat, whose number we're gonna ask for at the project later. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. Some of you guys are like, yes, I'm ready for this. But there are thousands of other decisions that your mind subconsciously makes. Now, you know, like you knew you ate like a egg on toast this morning and you put on jeans, thank God. But you may not remember the thousands of other decisions you make because you just made it subconsciously. And it's the exact same thing with God. We figure like, God, you have to show up here and now. You have to work in a mighty way. Where are you? This bad thing happened. You don't exist. If you do exist, you're not really good. But you're not realizing that there's thousands of other different ways, thousands of other moments where God has come on your behalf. And we say, God is faithful. And sometimes we shriek. Sometimes we're like, ugh. But there are times and time again that God has come through for you on your behalf. He's taken time and time again, painful things and turned them for good. Consider the cross as proof. The pain and the brutality of it all and what was brought out of it. many, many sons and daughters to life and to eternity with no more pain and no more suffering. He gave us all a new life, and he did it out of death. So he could take your death, he could take your loss, he could take your pain and make something beautiful out of it. I know this is simple and straightforward, but consider this puzzle. My wife likes to do puzzles. I don't. It frustrates me, but it calms her down. It's therapeutic for her. But every time she does a puzzle, she always puts the picture up like this. You see it? Yeah. I guess a lot of puzzlers do this. They put the box up like this as they're doing the puzzle. Why? Because at first, it's just very complicated, it's confusing, there's no clarity. But time and time again, as you're constantly looking at the picture, some pieces get into place, some pieces click, and now you're starting to realize, oh, this is actually coming together and looking like Machu Picchu in Peru, okay? And it's like that sometimes with our lives if you don't follow Jesus. That you'll be given these puzzle pieces, and you're mad, and you're frustrated, and you're confused because you don't know where to put it, you don't know what to do with it. But as Christ followers, we have the opportunity and blessed to look towards Jesus, which is the picture of the puzzle. And so if you're given this piece that you don't really know what to do with, guys, all you gotta do is just look at the picture. Look at Jesus. Be in his word. That is his communication to you and I. And as we look towards Jesus, slowly and surely the pieces will come together, and you will realize at the end of your life, wow, the picture is beautiful, and it goes beyond you and I altogether. So, as we take communion together, the band's gonna play, and as they're playing, whenever you're ready, there are gonna be 2 baskets here, and just grab a piece of emblem, and then just go back to your seat. And the song we're singing is pretty straightforward, but awesome. And if you can just sit there, reflect, stand if you want to, and then after the song is sung, I'll come back out and I'll just lead communion all together. But my prayer for you as we close off this evening before we head into worship is look towards the picture. Look towards Jesus. God will work everything for good. But what's the definition of good? Is it good in our eyes or good in his eyes? He will work everything for good. His good. And God's plan goes beyond you and I together. God's plan goes beyond your life and for the ages. But what an honor, what a privilege and an opportunity that God does not need you, but he chooses to invite you. He chooses to ask you to be a part of his plan. God's plan is going to happen whether you and I decide to hop in it or not. But looking at how God can work, I for sure don't want to miss out on what God can do in and through my life. And if that's you, if you feel heavy, if you feel distracted, if you feel like I really had a crappy week, hey, you came to the right place. If I don't know who Jesus is, I'm not sure if I belong in church, hey, you came to the right place. And so I'm gonna pray, and the band's gonna start to play, and you can come on up whenever you're ready, and then we will go through communion together after the song. Let's pray. Jesus, thanks so much for our time together. I pray that, one, you remind us of how good you are. I know it's easy for us to sometimes get sidetracked and distracted. And as a matter of fact, a lot of times get frustrated with things that aren't really going our way. But I pray that you remind us that you are way bigger than our plans can ever comprehend. You are way bigger than what we say or do. It says in the Bible, in your word, that your thoughts are not our thoughts. Your ways are not our ways. So would you remind us of that? And God, I pray for anyone here in this room that's feeling tired, that they feel like this week was just the hardest week and the crappiest week ever. I pray, God, that you would just let them know you're here. We don't need a formula sheet of why bad things happen to us. All we need right now is comfort, your presence, and a peace. So God, I just pray for that. In Jesus' name, as we take our time together in communion, may we remember you in Jesus' name.